Welcome back to the .NET with IoT series. In this video, we're going to do an advanced module. We're going to add a temperature sensor to our circuit and make the LED blink based off the reading values. So this is a BME 280 temperature sensor. We will be adding this to our circuit, and this sensor component can take not only temperature readings, but also humidity and pressure readings. Let's take a look at what the breadboard diagram for this will look like. So we're going to add 4 new wire connections that will connect to specific ports on the Raspberry Pi, which will help the Raspberry Pi get readings from this temperature sensor. So let's go grab our components and make these connections. So following the fritzing diagram, I have my breadboard set up here. I've connected the BME 280 sensor to the breadboard. I have made the 3 connections of the wires onto the Raspberry Pi already. And this is the last and 4th connection that I have to make to the SCK portal. With this complete, this finishes our circuit that we will use for the BME 280 pressure sensor. Now that we've finished our connections on the Raspberry Pi, let's go write some code. So I'm in the .NET Core GitHub repo. I've changed the tag from master to release 3 because we're using .NET Core 3 in our sample. I'm going to go look for our BME sensor folder. Within this folder, you will notice that apart from all other files, there's a folder called sample. So let's go look at that. I will specifically look at the sample for our sensor. So this is the BME 280 sample. So looking at this sample code, we're going to now copy over and use the lines of code that we need to change how our Blinky code works. So instead of Blinky always constantly blinking the LED, we'll change it so it will only blink the LED when we have a certain reading value from the BME sensor. So let's get started. So first we can see that it does some initialization to create an instance of the sensor. So let's go ahead and do that. So we need this constant value. So I'm going to move this over into our code. The next thing is that we're going to create an instance of the BME2 sensor. So let's go grab that here and see what's happening. So the first, we think we need to pull in the reference. So we're going to pull in the device IO, and let's go pull in the device NuGet package. So the first thing that's happening here is we're creating a connection which uses the Raspberry Pi bus ID and the default address at which the BME2 sensor is connected. We then create an instance of this device setting and initialize an instance of the BME2 sensor itself. Now that we've created an instance of the class, let's use it. So using this instance variable, I'm going to move the logic of blinking the LED inside of this using. And now we want the logic to be that the LED is not constantly blinking, but we are instead constantly getting readings from the sensor and then using that reading value to control the blinking of the LED. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to move this while loop out of here and instead move it up here. So while we constantly get readings from the IC, from the BME 280 sensor, let's go set up the variable so we can get that actual reading value. So first we have to turn it on. So what this does is it turns on the device, turns on the power mode, and then if we hover over here, it says it performs one measurement, stores the results, and then puts the device to sleep. The next thing we're going to do is set the sampling value. So for this sample, we're going to use the humidity value to control the LED. So I'm going to go grab this to set the sampling rate. It's currently set to low. Let's change the resolution to something higher so we get some good result values for this demo. The next thing we're going to do is now read the actual values. So over here, I'm going to go grab the humidity value over here. So let's see what's happening here. So if we notice, we'll see that this is it's setting up a variable called humidity value, and it is reading it async. So the advantage of using the IoT device binding NuGet is that it encapsulates a lot of simple functionality like reading humidity or reading the temperature without me having to go in and sort of set up the IO pin readings or trying to understand how do I translate the value from the sensor to my Raspberry Pi. So I'm going to go in here. So you'll notice there's a word here that's await. So this is happening async. So we need to go and set up our main program reference to adjust for the async task. So to do that, we're going to come in here and add async and add the word task. So this is going to pull in another system reference called threading. So this basically just means that it's going to create an asynchronous reading of the humidity value and grabbing the values for us. So once we have these values coming in, all we have to do now is let's print out this value in the console so we know what's happening. So that's what this console write line is doing over here. The next step, so we've initialized the BME sensor, we set the sampling rate, and we are reading the value from it. Now let's use this value to control that LED. So if the humidity value is greater than 38, then I want the controller to come in and blink this LED. So this is the end of this. I'm going to end this if statement. Let's format this code a little bit so we understand what's going on. So what we have here, let's do a quick recap. We created an instance of the device settings, created a device class, and then initialized a BME 280 sensor variable. Using that BME 280 sensor variable, we set its sampling mode, set the power mode that we want to use, and now we are reading values that the sensor is getting, and we are specifically using the humidity value. If we look at the GitHub sample, the BME sensor can also provide temperature, pressure, and altitude values. Then we are now putting a check on that humidity value that if it is greater than 38, only then do we want the LED to blink. And the rest of the LED blinking logic is exactly the same of what we had from Blinky. So we've only added these few lines of code looking at the sample in GitHub to get this code going. So now I'm going to go into my command prompt and copy over this file. So we'll be using Docker again to do this. So I'm going to go into the folder where I have my code, which is right over here. And then I'm going to SSH into our Raspberry Pi and create a new folder where we will copy over these files. So let's go into our Pi. Now, once I'm in the Pi, I'm going to make a new folder. Let's call it BME. And I'm going to make a new instance and go back to where our code is. So now I'm going to copy over the new code files into the Raspberry Pi. So let's go back and use our handy HCP. And I'm going to say copy Blinky onto the Pi at the address. And our folder name was BME. Similarly, I'm going to copy over the Docker file. Whoops, looks like I made a typo. Let's go fix that. Docker file, and copy that over to our Raspberry Pi. And our last file is the actual code file. So let's copy that into our Pi and into the folder called BME. So those are the three files that we need to get started. So let's now go back into the Raspberry Pi. Let's go into our folder, make sure our files are in there. Excellent, I see all of them. So let's go and follow our Docker build steps. So And let's call this Blinky. Now that the code is done building, let's run it on a Raspberry Pi. So I'm going to do docker run and provide it the device permission to use the GPIO pin for the LED. And now I'm going to pass in a new device permission to use the I2C port to control the BME 280 sensor. Then let's run Blinky. So it's doing a console print of the humidity value, but it's not at our threshold yet. So if I switch over to my camera and put my finger on the sensor, you will notice that the LED now starts blinking. And if I go back to the reading, you'll see that the humidity value has reached 50%, which passes our if-else check. And now the LED starts blinking. This is the end of our IoT with .NET Core video series. Please be sure to check out our other videos on ASP.NET Core, C# and .NET Core videos. I hope you enjoyed the series, and I hope you go and blink some LEDs.